essential element of all things about experimental aviation is, if we go back, how many people have been in the EAA since the 1980s? Okay. How many people have got a copy of old Sport Aviations going back into the 1960s laying around their house? Okay. Central feature to me of all of this stuff and why we're here and why it's significant comes down to this. Is if you go back and we look at today is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. Everybody old enough to remember that? Even me. And so let's go back to the month of the moon landing 50 years ago. And if we had a copy of the Sport Aviation from that month, one of the characteristics that you would notice about Sport Aviation then is, you look at the projects that were in it and the airplanes that people were building, half the people who were in the EAA membership could afford half the airplanes that were in the magazine. All right, that's a magic number to me, because if it gets worse than that, whereas only 10% of the people in the EAA can afford the airplanes that are being discussed, one of the things about it is you're creating a spectator sport, and our branch of aviation was never meant to be a spectator sport, right? So if you go back to the events like the moon landing, the entire generation of people was aimed at being a participant in this, not a spectator. And if you look at the industry today, I've already got my commercial booth set up at Oshkosh. The entire thing is geared towards being a spectator event. Sure, they sell some airplanes there, but if you look at your rank and file EAA person, they cannot afford 90% of the things that are on display there. They're being subtly told by the industry, it's okay, you have a great spot sitting there on the sidelines watching other people. I find, as an American, I find that very idea of somebody telling me that I'm going to be a spectator because I'm not wealthy enough to be a participant, I find that very idea repugnant. Okay, and that's an important feature. So here you are, building Pietenpols. Has this situation existed before? Absolutely. If you take a look at Brodhead Pietenpol 90 years ago, what was the central feature that was going on in light aviation at the time, 90 years ago? What did 1926 bring? Depression. 29 brings the depression, but in 26 you have the formation of the CAA. What was one of the first things the CAA did? Grounded all the Jennies. So the era of barnstorming exists only till 26, and the CAA comes on board. They look at all the Jennies, which are now almost 10 years old, been stored outside, they're in rotten condition, and they ground all the Jennies. And instantly there are no affordable airplanes left. Bernard's work on the Pietenpol has its origins right there, because there were no more affordable airplanes. If you look at aviation magazines from the 20s, and I have a big collection of them, there was a whole bunch of stuff saying, well, Howard Hughes has a Boeing 100 that he's out flying with Gene Harlow. And that's great and everything, but that's spectator sports stuff. On the other hand, you had the forerunner of popular mechanics seeking out people like Bernard, and what they were looking for was participants in aviation. So, you know, how many people owned a hot rod in high school? Okay, a lot of us did. In the blue shirt, what year did you graduate from high school? Okay, boy do I feel old, because I graduated in 1980. But in 1980, there were those of us who had Chevelles, Camaros, and Mustangs, and these were obtainable cars. And then there was this odd sect of guys I knew in high school who had a picture of a Lamborghini on their wall, and you were like, you do understand that you will never own that. And they were like, no, it's the coolest, it's the best, I have a subscription to Road and Track. And there were the rest of us who had subscriptions to Carcraft, because just not going to be a spectator. I don't know what it's in somebody's nature to make them a spectator, but Bernard had 0% spectator in him. He was 100% builder. And I suspect that if you're here on the 90th anniversary of Pietenpols, essentially you are 100% participant and 0% spectator. Some things in aviation are worth being a spectator at. I will watch the moon landing replayed, and I will revel in the idea that Neil Armstrong, awesome human being, but he came out of being a participant. You don't get guys like him from a culture of spectatorship. All right, so we got that covered, and that's important to touch base on, because how many people is this your first trip to Brodhead? Okay, welcome. It's important that you can come here and you can find that element of home building that existed in the July 1969 Sport Aviation magazine. It still exists. It's just not at the forefront of what the discussion is. It's not how the money is made for like large corporate clients or anything like that. I always tell people it doesn't matter what the industry is doing. It doesn't matter what the industry trend is. It doesn't matter what's going on now. All that matters is that you run the show that you want. If there are only 15 people left in America who are traditional home builders and you feel like you ought to be one, that's 16. But you don't have to care about what everybody else is doing. That's sort of, that's not bucking the system, and that's not going against the trend. That's just focusing on the part that you pay attention to. I'll spend all week at Oshkosh. This is my 26th year at Oshkosh, where I've been there all week. And people say, oh my God, did you see the Icon A5? It's ripping, none of this stuff. And did you see the Cessna Skycatcher? I go to Oshkosh, and I don't focus on the things that I don't like. I focus on the things that I do like. There's plenty to see when you go there. The same way when aviation magazines arrive at my house, there are a lot of them that I simply do not read, and I won't hurt Charlie Decker's feelings by saying that I don't always read sport aviation these days. But I'm just focused. You got so many hours a day, and you got your dreams and your desires, and as long as they're good dreams, then who cares what everybody else is doing? Who cares what the major trend is? Yeah, that's the reality and the message that I want to send you. Particularly if this is your first visit here. You need some affirmation. How many people belong to a local EAA chapter and attend like 6 or 8 meetings a year at least? Okay? The amazing thing to me about this is I have my local EAA chapter meeting meets 400 feet from my house. Unless I'm in a particularly good mood, I don't go down there. Because my EAA chapter is probably, much like yours, Mark, much like yours, my EAA chapter has a lot of people who are spectators in it. And when a spectator, when you say, I have found my own path, I'm going to do my own thing, the spectator feels overwhelmingly like he must tell you what he would have done. And who has not experienced this at their local EAA chapter? We used to have a phrase in chapter 288, which was one word, and nada, right? And nada, and that is a slang term for the compression of the words, you know what I would have done? Because people said it so frequently it came out compressed. And the magic answer is when people say to you, you know what I would have done? The magic answer is they wouldn't have done anything. So if you're a home builder and you're here, I mention all of these things about the spirit of home building and why Bernard is important 90 years later. The reason why is that you need the affirmation. It's not going to come from the magazine. You grab you open the magazine, you read about the latest gas turbine, TBM 850 that you're supposed to like admire the specs on. This doesn't have anything to do with reality. Your reality anyway. On and on. So you just focus on the stuff that is on your path and going to serve your goals, and stay with that. And it doesn't really matter what the guys in your local EAA chapter say. It doesn't really matter that the feedback doesn't come back. Did somebody go to the internet? Did somebody go to the internet this week?
We got trouble with it all day long.
Okay, back on. All right. This is why we don't have a computer on a Corvair motor running the ignition system. Because inherently, I know I hate these things. All right. Afterwards, we have a special treatment for you in my backyard. Hello?
Fortunately, I can talk loud. Can everybody hear when I speak at this level? Yes. Okay. Thumbs up. Okay, so that's, you know, for you to take with you is that you're supposed to have your own affirmation, and there are people out there who will assist you in being your own era of what Bernard was in his, which is a pure home builder. Okay, let's talk first. Let's cover weight and balance manual. Okay, how many people here have a question that I can run through with you on weight and balance? Anybody have a question yet? What, in the red shirt?
Hi. So I was reading through the book, and you have a lot of examples that you've measured up. If you haven't built yours yet, how can you plan ahead to make sure that you don't end up outside of the weight and balance?
Okay. The question here is about how do you use this manual to get the airplane that's your project to work? All right.
Hello? Hooray. Electronics restored. You're given a slight reprieve before I take you back to Florida. Okay, how do you get this to work together? What type of engine are you building?
I don't know yet.
Okay, when you look at the airplane, let's go over a couple of things really quick that are a little bit of mythology associated with the stuff. There's a mythology that says,
Short.
Hello? There's a mythology that says short fuselages are better on weight and balance than long fuselages. This is a complete myth.
Everybody who's building. I don't have enough money to buy them with new ones.
Hello?
Okay. No?
Still not happy? Happy? Okay. Is there a spare battery around for this thing? Okay. We'll see how long it lasts before it does.
You know, a lot of people know that I really hate electronics and like social media stuff and everything. And I'm looking over there at Terry Hand because I'm thinking, did you put that battery in it, Terry, before we got started?
Not mine.
Not yours. Okay. Well, let me start. All right. So here's what we want to go through first: is if you're new and you're thinking about starting a Pietenpol, build a long fuselage airplane. No matter what engine you're building, build a long fuselage airplane. How tall are you and how much do you weigh?
I'm 6 foot tall and I'm 240 pounds.
Thank you, Dory. Okay, you can build any, if you have a long fuselage or a short fuselage, we can get you in the weight and balance picture safely with plenty of room to spare with a little pre-planning, and it doesn't matter which engine you're working with, okay? I have examples in here that we would work from each one. But just out of room in the airplane, build a long fuselage airplane, okay? That's done. Second, then we have examples in here, and let's say you chose a Continental. I can take a look at the Continentals that are in here and talk to you on the telephone, and we could, based on how much you weigh, I could start with where your wing is going to be located on the long fuselage. Now, if you read through the manual, we have slightly different terminology. There are people who say, oh, everybody knows how to do a weight and balance. Really? Because I'm an A&B mechanic, and I'll tell you that if we went up to average pilots who were supposed to be able to know how to do weight and balance, and I just said to them, you know, right now, do a weight and balance, they couldn't to save their own life, right? But you got to be able to do a weight and balance in a Pietenpol better than that, right? The reason why the Pietenpol, if you look at it, how many people here have flown in a J3 Cub? Okay? Here's why a J3 Cub and a Pietenpol, which look vaguely alike, here's why the CG matters in a Pietenpol more than a Cub, right? When you sit in a Cub and you rear seat solo it in a J3, right? Think about where the rear spar is in relation to where your head is, right? It's essentially right above your head as you're sitting in a Cub. When you are sitting in a Pietenpol, now think about where the rear spar is in relation to the pilot's head. It's out here, right? So everything about your weight is amplified in a Pietenpol. So guys who say, well, I flew Cubs and we just loaded them up and everything. You can get away with some things in Cubs. You can get away with stuff in some airplanes. But a Pietenpol, because the pilot sits so far back behind the wing, this is why it matters. Small differences in pilot weight make a big difference in this. So you're going to plan it a little bit. If we look at this, you can take a look at the examples in here and see how far you would have to move the wing and where you would start with. Not before you finish the fuselage. But let's say you got a done fuselage. Before you build a landing gear leg for the airplane, and before you build the conveyance struts, you've got to know where the wing goes. And that's a relatively simple calculation to do in advance. That's thanks, Kevin. Why does it always have to be one of your friends? You can't give the guy a hard time in front of everybody. So you can do the calculation, but we would look at it together, and I would show you how far back the wing would have to move in order to get it set right. If you know where that is, and I can predict that really accurately based on your weight, and we can run that through a computer program that we have, and I can spit that out right away. And you can go ahead and you can build at full steam ahead, knowing that you're going to have the axle in the right location and you're going to have the wing in the right location when your airplane is done. So you would find an example and work from there. Okay? So you have to decide. For starters, I'll decide for everybody, build a long fuselage. Second, after the fuselage is done and you know what motor you're going to go with, then we're going to place the axle in the wing in position related to how much you weigh. How much difference does it make if one guy's 200 pounds and one guy's 240? In a J3 Cub, it doesn't make that much difference. In a Pietenpol, that's a big difference, and the wing needs to be in a slightly different location. The good news is Kevin, who just answered his cell phone, his airplane is out there. Airplane. What? We were looking for a lost airplane. Okay, yeah, good. Kevin's airplane, Kevin, wave high. Okay. Kevin and Shelley right here. Kevin's airplane is in here, right? There's a mythology that says you can't build it to have that much useful load or that or whatever, or the airplane has to be bigger or all of that stuff, right? There's an example in here that will show you that Kevin's airplane, because of planning and working together, he has the capability of a 310-pound pilot in his airplane flying. And okay, 310-pound pilot safely flying it within CG. We have other airplanes. Where's Ryan? Ryan, are you standing up? All right, Ryan, stand up. This guy needs a round of applause. He's my compatriot on this. All right. What was the low number? It's like 111 pounds. Right. Yeah. There was an airplane that we weighed right here that if the pilot weighed more than 111 pounds dressed, it was out of the app CG limit. Okay?
And that airplane otherwise weighed under 600 pounds empty. It's done an admirable job of building it light, but 110 pounds max to be within limits.
Yeah, that airplane weighed under 600. It weighed under 600 pounds. So you think, holy, it's got a great useful load, right? No, it had no capability to lift that weight because it couldn't stay within CG on it. All right. One of the other examples that we had was, how many people are familiar with the Big Pete aircraft? Okay, Big Pete aircraft were made with a lot of hoopla and all that other stuff, and I knew those guys going all the way back to 2003. Nice guys and everything. Not big on planning, right? You look at Big Pietenpol, they are some of the heaviest airplanes out there. And you think, well, if it's the heaviest airplane, at least it's strong and it would be able to carry a lot of weight. You can't carry a 200-pound pilot because it didn't have the planning in it. All right? So, also, Big Pete weighs more than 100 pounds more than Kevin's airplane, right? So not only can it not carry a big pilot, right, it can't carry its gross weight challenge, right? So you could have a really light airplane that can't carry anybody, You can have a really heavy airplane that can't carry anybody. You have an airplane that has planning, right? And it can carry a 310-pound pilot and a passenger without any problems. Now, Pietenpols, right? I've flown a Pietenpol at 1,450 pounds, right? 1,450 pounds. Won't fly one out of the aft limit, but I'll fly one above the idealized gross weight of the airplane. So, if you look at it, the airplane has the capability of structurally lifting significant amounts of people, but it can't be done safely and successfully with an aft CG. Now, how many people here are familiar with what happens when you got an aft CG in the airplane? Okay. A lot of people, when I first came out with this information, said, "How do you know why is this?" How many people have flown radio-controlled airplanes? Okay. How much better do they fly power on than power off, stability-wise? Right. Works the same way in regular airplanes. So a lot of the stuff that you can get away with if you have an aft CG, if you have propeller wash over the tail, you will have the appearance of stability provided by a greater airspeed over the empennage than you actually have airspeed. That's how the propeller wash works. When the engine quits or it stalls, you will find out that an airplane that previously just seemed really, really light on the controls, right, now becomes uncontrollable. So there's variations on why this is important. People will always come up and say, "Well, I know a guy who once did this." What they're talking about is a guy who got away with something under certain circumstances that may not apply to you. So I assume that you're not putting in the thousands of hours in your workshop to see what you can get away with. You're putting in the thousands of hours in your workshop so that you can fly your airplane around the country and have it in CG, carry passengers that you would like to know that you've done a good job. How much difference in work does it take to build the airplane that couldn't carry a 112-pound pilot or one that can carry a 310-pound pilot? How much difference? About one evening of reading this book, right? About one evening of reading it, right? My cell phone number, personal cell phone number, is in here. You can call me. I will tell you, I need to think about that a little bit. Then I call Ryan and say, "Ryan, what's the answer?" Come on, smart guy, spit it out. My reputation's on the line. Right. So, between Ryan and I, we can work through any problem on this. There is a crazy thing where people will only later on say, "Wow, I really should have called you. We only gave you the phone number. We wrote the book for you. We said everything." You got to take the last step if you're planning this thing. Now, here's the other issue: is that's CG. Now we have axle location. Right? Anybody know how many registered Pietenpols there are in the country? All right. Doc Mosier kept really good notes on this near the Pietenpol registry. It's about 400, right? If you ask me how many were airworthy and could fly in the next 2 weeks, it's about 200, 225, okay? Now think about that. Do you know how many J3 Cubs there are in the country? There's about 20,000 of them, right? 20,000. So think about 200 versus 20,000, right? When was the last time you saw a J3 Cub on its back at your local airport or read about one in a paper? Anybody ever seen this in person? Okay. Anybody here ever hear of a Pietenpol ending up on its back? Okay. You people. If you look at the 1933 plans, the axle is located 10 inches behind the leading edge of the wing. All right. That's what people did when you didn't go to an airport, you went to an airfield. And when you were in an airfield, what was the characteristic of the landing?
Landing in any direction.
Directly into the wind. Did the airplane need brakes? No, you couldn't have them anyway if you wanted them, right? Airplanes didn't have brakes, they had tail skids. When you want to turn an airplane that's got a tail skid on it, one of the requirements is you got to have forward stick pressure and you got to lighten the tail. So 10 inches behind the leading edge was appropriate in 1933 for airplanes that were landing directly into the wind at airfields. Not when they become airstrips or runways. Now you're not going to land directly into the wind. You're going to have a tail wheel on it in a lot of cases. And if you add the magic element of brakes, and you have the axle 10 inches behind the leading edge, people will say, oh, my airplane's been flown that way for years, or I heard of a guy who did that and he didn't have a problem, or I think this is great. One way to get away with that and have it not end up on its back, who knows what it is? If you fly behind the aft CG limit of the airplane, it effectively moves the weight back and tricks the airplane into feeling better on the ground. But if you actually have an airplane that's got an axle 10 inches behind the leading edge and you have brakes on it, sooner or later you're going to get caught on this and you're going to get distracted and the airplane's going to be upside down. Why should you really be concerned about that? Is that dangerous to put an airplane upside down? Do you know the answer to this? A significant amount of people end up spending the rest of their life in a wheelchair. End up spending the rest of their life in a wheelchair with the airplane turned upside down. Do you know how they do this? Yeah, you release your seatbelt when you're upside down. You know what causes people to release their seatbelt? They can smell gasoline. You turn the airplane upside down on the runway, it's sitting there, the fuel vent's open, you can smell the gasoline.
It'll stop eventually.
Thank you. More electronics, right? All right, you can smell the gasoline on the runway. You're hanging upside down by the seatbelt. It is a very, very tough human reaction to control not releasing your seatbelt. There are people who do it all the time and break their neck, right? Not everybody's lucky enough to end up as a paraplegic. Some people end up as a quadriplegic. This is nothing to fool around with. Am I trying to scare people off from aviation? No. Am I trying to talk some common sense into people and say, don't put your axle at a location 10 inches behind the leading edge, right? At the leading edge. My own Pietenpol, axle 1 inch ahead of the leading edge. One of the characteristics about it that was kind of interesting was you want to see how short you can land it with brakes and the axle 1 inch ahead of the leading edge. I would not do it, but Gus Warren landed it on dry pavement with the brakes locked to show people that it wouldn't go over on its nose. Stopping distance, about 75 feet. Right? So much for stole airplanes. Bernard invented them a long time ago, right? So, it doesn't make the airplane significantly harder to handle. How many people here have flown a Luscombe before? Okay? Luscombe is one of the very few classic airplanes that has a reputation for having a little bit of a tendency to end up on its back, right? It has a tall stance, a little narrow landing gear, but that's not the crucial issue. The crucial issue is the landing gear is 2 3/4 inches behind the leading edge, right? That makes all the difference over its reputation over Cubs, right? So how do you think 10 inches behind the leading edge feels with brakes on, right? So as long as you're doing this, we're going to set the left where your wing is on the fuselage appropriate for your engine and your weight, and that is not a tough calculation. And once we know where that is, we also automatically know where your axle is going to go, because you're going to have brakes on your airplane, right? Yeah. Great. Now, here, how many people belong to any of the social media groups or read this stuff or talk about stuff about Pietenpol building online? A lot of people do. How many debates have we seen over stuff like esoteric small details on stuff? You know, why you should thin your paint with like milk instead of whatever, and you know, how you can go to Lowe's and buy this nail for cheaper than an aircraft bolt at the Hanover, whatever people like. People talk about this stuff, and I get it. It's fun to talk to other people who are interested in building. But you need to, first and foremost, before you spend the time talking about esoteric, aesthetic details, you gotta have the actual animal mechanical characteristics right on it. This is for your own good, and it's also, if you take a look at it from a standpoint of, you got to put the thousands of hours in anyway, how about the thousands of hours plus 1 evening, or the same level of time and one less argument you read about using latex paint thick with milk or water or storage systems or whatever it is. Stay out of that for 1 evening, read the book. All right? Now, when we came out with the book is available here from the guys at 431. A couple of guys worked on this with me along the way. There were a lot of people who allowed their airplanes to be weighed, and we put all this stuff together. My major compadre on this was Ryan, as we said before. We were here 8 and 9 years ago and gathered up all this data. We put it in the newsletter when Doc published it. It's not as easily available in the modern era, so we agreed to, with that we can put it in, all in one book so it would be in one place. Then Dan and Tracy came out, and we all went to Terry's house, and we edited all the stuff and put it into one book. And then we went to, I talked to Pat Whedon and said, Dan and Tracy are going to have them printed up. We'll bring a pile of them there. You guys sell them, and other than the printing cost, you guys keep that for the good of Brodhead here. So when you pick up a copy of this, one of the benefactors are the very people who are your hosts here making the event possible. So even though we said that, there was a little bit of pushback online where some people said, oh, do we really need to have that? It seems like you published that before, or nobody really needs that. Every pilot knows how to do weight and balance. If you read the charts of the data that Ryan and I took on people's airplanes, evidently people do need to read this, and people do need to spend the time on it. We got some of the data 8 and 9 years ago. The data is numbers, it's home building, it's timeless. You can't really argue with it. The people that we weighed the airplanes here, of all the airplanes that came here, I'm going to say every single Continental guy wished his wing was about 2 or 3 inches back from where it was. You can take a look at it. Without any doubt, they would have benefited from that. The weights, when you read this stuff, of the maximum pilot weight, you know, basically, it could need to be improved, because some guys were kidding. When a guy stands there and he's my size and he says, you gotta weigh 156 pounds. I was like, you and me in junior high, buddy, weighed 156 pounds, right? And I don't want to see you flying naked anyway. You know? So the book is benefits the local people here. It is organized. We are willing to work directly with you, and since this is being recorded, we have you on tape. So your airplane better turn out good. You better call me and Ryan so we get it squared away. But this is what I would like to do, is make a lasting contribution to making many, many more people's airplanes better to fly, more satisfying, and something you can really be proud of. Again, the ethic of saying, what can I get away with, versus I really, really want to make it right. You're much better off in aviation spending your time and listening to people whose goal is to get it right. A member of my family just recently started teaching college after a long career in medicine, and sent out a post and was sharing that somebody at the particular university said they were going to build a culture in the classroom that was respectful and everything. And I thought about this, and when I went to Embry-Riddle, I had Chandler Titus as a master engine instructor. Chandler Titus worked at Embry-Riddle for 53 years. He flew 50 missions in B-17s in World War II as a ball turret gunner. He couldn't hear a damn thing you ever said. 2 50s right on each side of your head in a ball turret. Did that for 50 missions. Then he flew almost every day of the Berlin airlift as a C-54 flight engineer. Did all that. Then he went to Embry-Riddle because he was 27, and how long is somebody supposed to live anyway? And then he taught for 53 years in Embry-Riddle. He was the least respectful college professor I ever had. The concept of like him building a culture in the classroom, I find that really That was not a personal goal of his. He didn't care to learn your name. He didn't care a damn thing about, your sensitivities. He was there to share what he knew with a new generation of people who wanted to learn it. That's what the mission was. And I was cultured under that guy. I will tell you, yes, he hurt my feelings when he didn't care who I was. I thought, for a moment, for a nanosecond one day, I thought, I'm the one writing the check for the tuition. Technically, he works for me. I got about that far into it thinking, like, I don't really think a guy who crawled into a bald turret on a B-17 actually goes for arguments like that. Like, I'm the consumer, you're the provider, and I have a little problem here with your service. No, not Chandler Titus. So, compared to Chandler Titus, I am Mr. Sensitivity, and I should be writing Hallmark gift cards, right? But the major focus was that Chandler Titus knew so much about Lycomings and other engines that Lycoming, when they were going to go back into making parts for 480s and 435s, had no living person at Lycoming who understood how those engines were put together. So they sent a contingent down to Embry-Riddle to speak to Chandler Titus, who was overhauling those things when he was in his 30s, right? So, real information and real attitudes are timeless. And, so this is what we're trying to do. There's a lot of stuff where people come out and say, if the information is not delivered really, really sensitively, or he offended a friend of mine, or I don't like the way that guy dressed, or anything like that, I would like to bring you back through a time machine to meet Chandler Titus, and I will show you someone who really doesn't care about that stuff. But who made the lasting impression on me? Who taught me more than somebody else did? It was Titus, and guys like that. So, I have stuff like that on my 30th year in home building that I want to share with people. I want you to build better airplanes. I want you to have stuff that's safe to operate. I care because other people who came before me cared enough to teach that stuff to me. Who's got the next question on weight balance?
Said Williams, if you move the wing back, you just tip the K-line struts back, or
There's a lot here. Let's touch on another mythology. A lot of people say, "Oh, I want to have threaded fittings on my diagonal conveyance because I'm going to move the wing back and forth and fine tune it." Right? The average wing movement that a Continental would have needed from the ones that we had would have needed to move the wing moved like 3.5 inches from where it was. Nobody's got a thread. Hopefully, nobody's got a threaded rod long enough to do that. Here's the other thing where people gloss over. Well, you would just move the wing. Nobody's got enough motion on the wing to move it as far as they need to. It's not. Guys aren't building 3/4 of an inch on threaded rod. It's gonna make almost no difference on it. You have to move the wing on an average Pietenpol. To move the CG 1 inch, you have to move the wing 1.3 inches. Right? So forget the threaded rod and moving it later. You got to build it in the right spot for starters. Also, if you got a Pietenpol, you understand this. If you were to move the wing back 3 inches, none of the control cables are going to be right. They're not going to exit the cockpit combing in the right location. And in lots of cases, they're going to be rubbing on the back of the instruments if you actually tried that. There's all sorts of things that don't fit if you did that. Okay? And so you got to pre-plan this stuff. It's way harder to correct it later. If you talk about moving the wing back 3 inches, there isn't enough adjustment. You're going to have to rebuild the lift struts to get it. Right? All sorts of things. There is no one afternoon of moving the wing back. There would be months of downtime on some of these things to get the wing to move. So the solution is to build it in the correct location with pre-planning beforehand.
So what is the primary variable that changes when you're planning? Is it the length of the engine mount? Is it where the mounts go into the launch rods?
We have all the information in here on the length of motor mounts, and we have all of that information on there. The primary variables are the pilot's weight. Now, if you need to adjust the airplane for the pilot's weight, you're moving the location of the wing above the fuselage, forward and backward. In the discussion, Ryan and I did the calculations on this stuff in great detail. You take a 65 Continental and you put it on an airplane and you want to move the CG 1 inch, you got to move the 65 Continental if it has a wood prop on it like 4 inches further ahead. So let's say you need to get 2 inches on it. You're going to make a motor mount that's 8 inches longer. It could be done. With a motor mount, sure better not be made out of 1/2 inch or 35 tubing, right? Then, if you take a look at it, how many people are familiar with seaplanes, like planes on floats? What do they do when a plane has floats to the tail? They add more surface area. So if you see a plane with floats, because the nose of the floats are lateral area ahead of the CG, they often put like an extension on the bottom of the fuselage and straight. They'll end plate the elevator on some airplanes because they don't have enough vertical tail anymore if you put floats on it. If you take a motor mount and you make it 8 inches longer on a Pietenpol cowling, you're effectively doing the same thing that the nose of a float does. You follow? So, and a Pietenpol does not have a very large tail to start with.
So it's just for the vertical wing attached to the fuselage. That's how you
The
move
amount
the
of-
wing when you're designing.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you go online, there'll be plenty of people saying, all you have to do is sweep the wing back 4 inches and it's great and everything. Does that sound like a math calculation to you? If you went to your doctor and you said, I'm going to attach your bypass vein somewhere in the middle of your chest, right? You'd say, wait, I need somebody who's got a little more pre-planning than that. There's a lot of stuff where people say, oh, I'm going to angle the conveyance back 4 inches and that'll fix everything. That's somebody who doesn't want to dial the phone number here and have me and Ryan spit out the exact number for them. That's not planning, that's guessing. There'll be people who fall into 2 categories who won't call. I didn't want to bother them, right? But I got news for you. Bother us, right? Go ahead and bother us. Particularly if you're a Corvair guy and you think, I didn't want to bother him with my weight and balance information. I just later put the airplane on its back. That doesn't really help, all right? It doesn't help the airplane nor you or whatever. But under any circumstances, bother us. There are people who are like, I didn't really want to bother you guys, so I just asked online, and a guy who's got a name like Tool Builder 26 told me that just sweep them back 4 inches would be great. I was like, did he ask how much you weigh? No. Did he ask what engine you were using? No. I was like, then that's not an answer. Okay? So, and then the other group of people are the people who say, well, I don't want to ask them because that William Wynn guy sounds like a really nice, easy to get along with, super friendly guy. But that guy Ryan, what a jerk. And I hear this over and over again. And I try to defend Ryan, but he's got a big mouth under that. And no matter how many times I try and cover for him, you stick by your friend. But they're afraid to talk to Ryan because they think of him as an opinionated jerk. You know? And they're like, he used to have a ponytail and he drives around in rowdy old trucks. And I was like, no, Ryan's a good guy. But there are people who will not ask for assistance, right? Because they got some personal issue or some sort of problem and think, I don't want to ask him for help, all right? I'm going to say something that I want people to remember here. If your airplane has a second seat in it, they call it passenger seat, you have a moral obligation to find out everything you can about how to make your airplane better, no matter who you have to talk to learn it from. Because your passenger is going to make the assumption that you were enough of an adult to talk to somebody who you didn't like to find out how to make the airplane safer for them to sit in it. They aren't going to believe that you would say, I was going to talk to him, but he's kind of a jerk, or he was an ass to one of my friends who was super sensitive about something and whatever else. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. You got a single seat airplane, have at it. Have at it. Right? You got an airplane with a passenger seat in it, right? You got a moral obligation to talk to whoever you have to talk to and just deal with it to build a better airplane. Because the person who sits in your airplane, who you may not even have met yet, your grandkid who's not even born yet, is going to be under the assumption that you would do anything to make the airplane that they fly in measurably safer. And you have an obligation to live up to it. I'm sorry, that's how it works. So when I get people saying things like, I was going to talk to him, or whatever, and stunningly, people will actually tell you that. So, to me, personally, I got a lot of people in my past who I learned stuff from. Biggest jerk I ever met in aviation, and I'm going to say this carefully because you can record it, Dennis Long. Dennis Long, hardest guy to get along with I ever knew in my entire life, except he was unlimited aerobatic waiver, no altitude, hits builder of the first order, knew everything about aircraft maintenance on general aviation airplanes. Guy's a genius. He's also a tremendous jerk. And except he knew stuff, and people would say he's a jerk. I'd never go ask him. And I thought, if he knows it, I want to know it because I'm going to have to know it one day, and I don't care how big of a jerk he is. And I found out that I was willing to put up with anything to learn something from him. He wasn't such a big jerk anymore, as long as he understood that, right? So I'm nowhere near the problem to deal with.
We didn't really talk about it, or you didn't talk about it in the manual, but you do everything right, and you're almost finished, and you get ready to do your weight and balance, and you're checking the empty weight. Can I use 2 bathroom scales with a piece of plywood across the top? Will that be sufficient?
Were we running till 4:30 or were we running till 4?
He's on at 4:30, so that Pat said you had up until.
Okay.
We started late due to the weather.
Okay. The question was, can I use bathroom scales for weight and balance stuff? Right. Here's an example. I talked to Terry last week. What airplane did the guy have?
601.
Okay, Zenith 601. A guy at Terry's airport just weighted on bathroom scales. This is the first time I've ever heard of this, but it's actually true. He weighed that 601 on bathroom scales, and then he weighed it on electronic scales. In between the entire time, he thought, what a disaster I had having built this and everything. What did it turn out to be?
54 pounds lighter.
It was 54 pounds lighter on electronic scales. Almost without a problem. It will always turn out to be heavier on electronic scales. But bathroom scales are not an actual measurement of this stuff. I've seen people do this all along. A $10 bathroom scale made by slave labor in the People's Republic of China in Brodhead province is not a measurement tool for something that you spent thousands of hours doing this. If you want the electronic scales that we use to weigh all the Pietenpols up here, came from my EAA chapter in Florida. My EAA chapter in Florida had $1,500 in the bank. We were having a debate over what to do with it. I told them we ought to buy a set of scales. We ought to set of long-acre scales. The most popular thing that we've ever done. It was something decent for the chapter. If you don't have electronic scales, but you got an EAA chapter and they got $1,200 in the kitty, then go to Summit Racing and buy a set of long-acre scales. It will be the best investment in risk management your chapter ever made. You can come out smelling like a good guy and have your airplane weighed for freight on decent scales. Worked for me. All right. Next question on weight and balance.
So if we got all our numbers, we just send you guys an email and you crunch the numbers suggesting where laterally the weight planes are.
You have to know what length fuselage you're building.
Long fuselage.
Read the book,
1 inch.
right? What engine and how much you weigh, and how much the highest weight pilot will likely weigh, and a few other basic parameters. If you're building some of the really popular airplanes in here, you will instantly understand how, if your airplane is similar or you weigh in the same category as some of the examples. If you're more than 10% out on any value than an example here, you get on the phone with me and Ryan and we'll fine tune the information for you. Okay? Any other question?
Is the map out there somewhere? Like, I mean, as an engineer, I do like to see, a page of equations or something like that.
If you're an engineer, after this is over, you sit down with me and Ryan, and I want to show you the calculation on this. Okay? The calculation on a Pietenpol is different than the weight and balance calculation on other airplanes, because when you move the wing, you are adding and subtracting the entire weight of the wing and putting it back in at the new location. Or you can look at it the other way, and this is explained in the book, that the entire fuselage with the pilot in it and the landing gear and the engine are moving forward underneath the wing. So the algorithm for this, which I will take credit for saying, Ryan, you know what we ought to think up? Let's use your brain. And I had a couple of ideas on how this was going to work. So I was talking on Ryan, we were talking to Ryan on the telephone for a long time, and on this. But Ryan actually cracked the code on doing the algorithm for this, because I'm the grease monkey, and and you got a big brain, all right? So yes, Marine infantrymen smarter than grease monkey. That's not how it's supposed to go, but it does, right? So yeah, we'll show you the algorithm later if you're really interested in it. The math there's enough information in here for people to fine tune it themselves. The book has the information that if you never talk to us again and you did it, right, you could get it, right? I want to leave the door open for anybody to contact us so that we can fine tune it. What I don't want to have happen is somebody reads the book and says, I'm pretty sure I get this, but I don't want to bother that guy. And that guy Ryan sounded like kind of a jerk. So I'm just going to ask the local expert, my EAA chapter, who seemingly never built an airplane before, and I'm going to ask him how it's done. We're not doing that, right? So the moral of the story is, even though Ryan's a jerk, you're going to ask us about how to do it. But if you're out 10% on the values, you're going to check it with us. If you're right on the money with some of the values presented, check it with us anyway. That's, if you ask one question while you're planning out your airplane of anybody, for the love of Brodhead Pietenpol, ask us. Right? You can write a book like this, and I have no idea why. You can do this stuff. Ryan can spend 1 million hours on the telephone trying to make me look like a smart guy. You can do all this stuff. And for some reason, somebody who owns the book came here, met me, saw the phone number and everything. We'll still ask his next door neighbor at the airport, like, is this right? Because you were an airline pilot in 1972, and that makes you, I don't know how that works. I can't fix that. Weight and balance is my field of expertise. Human psychology and abnormal brains, not expert on. Question?
You're saying, you're asking how much the pilot weighs, right?
Yes.
What if you weigh 240 pounds and you make it work for you? Can a 100-pound girl fly the plane safely?
Give you a parameter on it, right? My own Pietenpol, when we have the final setup that we use, right, would take a 290-pound pilot, right, but would come in, to give you an idea of how the range feel on it is. Take a 290-pound pilot, but to get inside the 15-inch limit, took a 126-pound pilot, right? So the range is really, really wide on it. The problem is that most people get to the aft limit way too quickly. So you don't have to set up the airplane for a 40-pound weight range on people. It's over 150 pounds in most cases is the range. So you can target any reasonable position that you want on that. If you told me that dressed you weigh 200 pounds, I would say, that's great, we can set it up for that. But with almost no penalty, we could set it up for a 260-pound pilot, and where there would be no harm in that, and the 115-pound pilot could fly. Want to know something kind of odd about weight and balance? You can look through some of the examples that Ryan and I were talking about, particularly the Continental airplanes that didn't have any lean back in the conveyance. You'll look at those airplanes, and I know somebody who did this after we did the weight and balance work. It's an airplane that could not be soloed from the rear seat. But if you do the weight and balance stuff, and Ryan and I went through the numbers on this, some of those airplanes can be soloed from the front seat by a pilot who weighed 200 pounds. Like, that's how far out of whack some of the stuff is. All right? But a little bit of planning, you have a wide range that you can put the airplane in. We showed you the maximum pilot weights, but there's also, that's prominently in the discussion. But as you go through the examples in the book, the maximum and minimum pilot weights are listed in all of the columns, and you'll see how wide that is. So you don't have to target a small window, and you don't have to predict how much you're going to weigh. I predicted I was going to weigh 170 pounds in Oshkosh, and I missed slightly on that because I just had a springtime of having too many house guests who like beer and cookies. So, all right. One more question from anybody out on the field. Sure. No. No. The bolts are perpendicular to the crankshaft in the airplane, and the wing can move backwards on the airplane. We can walk right outside, and I can show you how you would do it. The only thing that's going to substantially change is the length of the diagonal conveyor on that. I got you. Okay.
How much influence you talk about when you're moving the wing, you talk about subtracting the weight of the wing, adding it at the new datum point. How much of that is affected by fuel tank position, center section fuel tanks versus header tanks versus forward tanks?
Okay, question on fuel tank location. Here, I'll give you one on this. The fuel tank and the stock location between the two wing spars has almost no effect on CG. You can run it full, you can run it empty, it works great. All right? Now, some people put header tanks in the front of the fuselage, right? That can be done. It's an acceptable idea. If somebody was starting from a fresh start, I would argue that a larger main fuel tank with greater capacity is better than two tanks. Right? I spent 5.5 years at Embry-Riddle. I'm a trained accident investigator. You know how many airplane accidents are the engine stops because there's no more fuel going to it, and it has two tanks, and both the valves are in the off position, right? Or there are plenty of scenarios where people think it's great. I'm drawing this up at home, and then I would turn the left valve this way, and I turn the right valve this way, and so on and so forth. And they look at it like they're the fuel, like they're the co-pilot managing the fuel in the B-52 on a strike mission to Russia.
You can ask John Denver how well that would work.
Yeah, so you can ask. Well, you can't ask John.
Well, no, I mean,
but with about 2 seconds ago, you'd say, "Was that a good idea, John?" Yeah. So the truth is, the simpler the systems, the better it works out, and you would make a larger wing tank and have the space on there and keep it all within CG. One of the examples of things that did not work in here was, I have an example where the guy did not pay attention to what we were doing. And we weighed his airplane, and I said, "You got a terrible aft CG problem." His solution, when he ran it by a DAR and a Fed to check out his airplane when he got it covered, was they said, "Oh, it has a header tank, and it has a header tank, and it has 42 gallons of fuel in it, right?" And with a pilot who said he weighed 170 pounds, he theoretically was 0.6 of an inch inside the limit. Burned 1 gallon of fuel out of the header tank. But that's 7 gallons of fuel we're never going to use. And then there was a little justification that said, well, the aerodynamic center of the Pietenpol's airfoil is so-and-so. Like he was the head of NACA talking about this stuff, right? I didn't remember in studying Abbott and Duntall theory of wing sections for years, them talking about, like, well, theoretically this. The truth is, the guy had no pre-planning, even though he ran into Ryan and I and we waited. Airplane ends up on its back. Not really a successful airplane. didn't pay attention to axle location, none of that. But he actually ran this past a DAR who signed the airplane off. Right? Why did the DAR sign the airplane off? This is a big question. Why does the DAR sign the airplane off? Because he got paid to, right? All right. So that didn't mean the airplane was airworthy. So in header tanks and that sort of stuff, you can talk about why you might want to have them or not, but I'm in favor of one wing tank. In terms of planning, it has no effect on CG having it above it. What time we got?
15.
All right. We're going to hit one or two more questions on this. After that, we're going to give up the room to the next guy who's speaking. If you got questions about stuff, I'm hanging out for dinner. I'll be around. But afterwards, if we want to go out and talk about how the domains are moved, we'll physically go outside and look at an airplane. And we'll walk out there to the flight line. We'll give the guy the room so he has a place to talk. And we'll go run and talk out there and do that. How many people have a question about Corvair stuff? Anybody? I'll cover that with. What's that?
How many does anybody next?
I think we got one guy after us. Yeah. Yeah. But we'll walk outside, and if you got a question on Corvairs or anything else, we can walk out there and talk about it. But here, let's hit one or two last quick questions.
Does the book address steel tube fuselage or leaf-spring tail wheels?
There are notes for each airplane that we weighed that we thought were significant variables on that airplane that would provide some error if people were operating without the assumption. When we had there are notes in the book to tell what tail wheel each airplane had on it. Also, like we met, late Dick Navratil had his Rotec powered airplane right here. His whole fuselage was plywooded in down the sides, all the way back, varnished and everything, and probably a little heavier than fabric. We made notes like that, and they're in the footnotes of each one of these things. So it's a variable on it. But what you find out is a lot of the airplanes we weighed had brakes and had normal tail wheels on them and everything, so they were representative of most airplanes. I've done a lot of work with Terry has a steel tube fuselage on his airplane, and Dan and Tracy Sheridan. I'm one that we've had these down in my shop. I've done a lot of work on these things, and I'm going to tell you that there's not that much significant difference in weight for those aircraft, and there's not a significant CG difference on those airplanes. The variations that people do in the weight of covering make a bigger difference. So that in proportion. And I'll be glad to cover any of those questions on proportions or modifications that you do. And if you got something that's a little significantly different than what we got in here, that's the kind of thing you call it.
Yeah, so put out with our electronic scale, bring in one of these books out, put it on the scales.
Yes.
We calculate the CG, find out it's not acceptable. What do we do?
At that point, that's where the rework comes in. If I had a 65 Continental and I was missing it by just a little bit, I'd buy a metal prop and bring it in.
Put a little weight up in the front.
Yeah, and I can tell you how much the metal prop would bring it in. Some of the airplanes, particularly ones that belong to second owners, those guys are flying stuff and they've never looked at it and they're like, I assume it was good and everything like that. This stuff happens all the time. When Ryan and I were weighing the airplanes, right, we had weight balance data that came with the airplanes. We had two airplanes that were owned by second owners. They came here and they flew over from an undisclosed state that begins with an O, not too far away. And they flew here. And when we were looking at the second one, Ryan produces a piece of paper and says, check this out. It's the identical CG report written in this guy's, claiming the airplanes weigh the same weight to the pound and everything like that. We looked at it, and it was clear, right, that one of the guys copied his homework from the other guy, right? You think that, right? Now, that's not fair, because that's not really what it was. Because after we looked at the airplanes and we put a tape measure on the landing gear locations, both of those guys copied their homework from another airplane. So the CG report that was in the airplane that these guys bought the airplanes with was actual fudged data put in there. Now, we can get around about people doing stuff like that, but that is genuinely unethical behavior, and I'm not really a big fan of that. You know, the aviation is the great passion of my life and everything, and we can have a lot of fun doing it once people understand that you don't do things like that. People copying a weight and balance report because they put in a couple of thousand hours building this thing, and they're too lazy to weigh it, and they want the DAR, and then they put that in there. Okay, bad enough. Want to go back to the passenger seat. Where's the moral obligation to do better? Okay, not good enough. Let's sell it to somebody else, right? Or we don't have to meet his passenger, right? This is genuinely unethical, first-hand, demonstrated behavior, right? There's no call for that type of stuff. You think Brotherhood of Home Building. If you think that way, you're right about half the time. The other half of the time, be wary of this stuff. So it's a lot of rework. If you're ever thinking about, or anybody you know is ever thinking about buying a Pietenpol, you would be an utter fool not to rip the scales and test the airplane yourself. The guy who owns it and is selling it to you might believe the report. Don't you believe it? And you have an obligation, because it has a passenger seat, to not believe it, to verify it.
If people want to see this again, it'll be up on your channel. You might want to tell them where it is
Okay,
and subscribe.
if you want to see this again, and you can bear looking at me twice, do it, or whatever, it's going to be on my YouTube channel. We're going to have it stuck up there in a day or so. More important, you can call me anytime that you like. We'll go through this stuff. I'm going to walk outside right now. We'll go talk about CG. We'll talk about forebears. We'll look at airplanes. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you're seeing, please remember to subscribe.